Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to my podcast or my YouTube channel. I'm Will Caminada, the multidimensional guide, and I'm here to help you awaken, heal, and expand your consciousness. Today, I am bringing a conversation episode, and I have the pleasure to talk to Maureen St Germain. Maureen is an Ascension teacher and an Akashic Records Guide. She's a bestseller author. She is the author of Waking Up in 5D and Mastering Your 5D Self. So we talked all about 5D consciousness, the fifth dimensional consciousness, which is something that I always talk about here in my channel or in my podcast. So it's great to see a different perspective on the subject. And Maureen is super practical. She gives a lot of tools and shares a lot of stories. And basically, I think this episode will help you to really embody 5D and be able to have more of those 5D experiences in your day-to-day life. If you enjoyed this episode, if it brings value, please share it with one of your friends who might benefit from this too. And if you feel called to in your heart, subscribe to my channel or my podcast and just enjoy the show. Hello, Maureen. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to connect with you, and I'm really excited to talk to you about all things 5D. You have amazing books on the topic, and it's a topic that is also very dear to my heart. And I talk a lot about here on the podcast and my YouTube channel. So I'm sure the viewers, the listeners, if they click, they want to know that something in them is already waking up. Just before we start talking about 5D, I love starting the interview asking about your spiritual awakening. So if you can share a little bit of your story in reference to your book, how did you wake up in 5D?
I actually think I was born awake. When I was a child, I did things that no one else could figure out how I would know. And on more than one occasion, I was able to discern what was happening or what was in the like Christmas presents. It's Christmas time. I remember, and I come through it honestly. As a child, I knew that my mother had hidden the book's Lives to the Saints that I had been looking at because it was a gold leaf edition and it had, beautiful pages. And I was a little clumsy as a kid. I think I still am a little. And so I'm sure she was worried that I would get it dirty or messed up. So she hid it. And when I went to look for it one day and it wasn't there in the bookshelf where I expected it to be, I just asked, "Where's that?" Not her, my inner wisdom. Where's that book? And I immediately knew where it was. Got a chair, climbed up on this chair, went in this closet, and on a high shelf and pulled it down, used it, and then when I was done, I put it back on the bookshelf where it belonged. I was like sending my mother a message. I got you. You can't pull this on me. And a funny story at Christmas time was my own mother was, my dad asked her to pick up this present that she wanted for Christmas, which was a beautiful beaded purse. And he drove her to the store in a snowstorm and she went in and got it. Then he put it on the table where she was wrapping all the presents. So she had to wrap it. And at Christmas Day, she's looking at this package, she unwraps it and she smiles sweetly at my father and holds it up for everyone to see and says, "Wouldn't it be funny if there was $100 bill in here?" And there was. And the funny part was that meant he had to find it and unwrap it, put the money in and rewrap it. So my journey has been a rather significant one because I was so different from everyone around me. When my children were little, I knew that I would be helping others, and I was making recordings to guide me through meditations and journeys without any training. So that's what I mean when I say I was born awake. And then I don't remember the exact year, but it's probably almost 20 years ago, I was given a message that I was being given a permanent guide and access to a dimension that had been closed to humanity for eons. And I believe that that dimension that was closed to humanity for eons is the Akashic Records. And because the Akashic Records were closed to humanity, except for the shamanic practitioners or the high-level spiritual people, and now anybody can get in. And so one day in a self-indulgent moment, I said, "So, am I the only one who has this access?" And I was told, "No, but you will be a way shower for many." So, it's really important that we not take ourselves too seriously, but that we spend our seriousness on our practice rather than on the outcome or the content. So, I teach people how to connect with their higher self, and it's highly effective. And you will get 100% accuracy, but you have to show up and do your part to get that to that level. And the trick for that particular practice is don't make the content important, make the showing up and practicing important.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big difference there. And it's a little bit like, when you learn a musical instrument, it doesn't matter what your teacher teaches or how they teach. If you don't do the practice, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And from that moment, that year that you got this message, this awareness of the Akashic Records, how did you go about exploring and practicing?
Well, honestly, I had not fully activated that right away, because being told you're given access to a dimension isn't available to people. How would I know what to work with? How would I know what to ask for? So when I started working in the Akashic Records, maybe a year or two later, it dawned on me, I was attracted to this work because of the gift, you see? Mm-hmm. So I trained with some traditional people who were teaching the Akashic Records, and I found their method good, but not good enough for me and who I wanted to teach and what I was being shown. So I developed a larger protocol to connect with the Akashic Records. And I have been in the Akashic Records for people all over the world. And I also teach my students to teach and to read for others.
Wonderful. I read in your book that the Akashic Records is in the 11th dimension.
That is correct. And, I came across another teacher who was highly respected, who was saying that it's in your DNA. So because I also respected this teacher, I asked my guides, what's the story? And went into the Akashic Records and asked my record keepers, and they said that the Akashic Records are indeed in the 11th dimension. And the teacher who said they're in your DNA are referring to the local records for each individual. So, and then they made the metaphor, when you are in a little city, you might go to the local library, but when you can get into the big city, you go to the big library or you go to the internet, you see. So you have a much bigger resource going to the 11th dimension. And our process literally creates a portal or a tunnel to that higher dimension. So you are able to access the Akashic Records without having earned the right to go there. So it's kind of like I have a godfather, or I have a special grandfather who's got access to certain things, and he opens doors for me. And that's essentially what has happened. A dispensation was granted to humanity so that any one of us, you, me, anyone, can access the Akashic Records.
Right. So it's not as linear as we think. Like, we don't necessarily
that's so wonderful that you said that. So fabulous. I believe that the biggest barrier to becoming fifth dimensional is our linear thinking, because we think in cause and effect. We think in terms of, I did this, I must have this done to me. And these are all linear thoughts. And it's not true in 5D at all.
Yeah. Let's talk about 5D then. And you wrote a book called Waking Up in 5D.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, more than one, but yes.
I also wrote this one.
Mastering your 5D self.
5D self, yeah.
Beautiful. And so just to give sort of structure or foundation, because I don't want to exclude anyone, because I assume most people, if they clicked here, they probably have heard of 5D. But if somebody has just heard once, they're not quite sure what it is, just to lay a foundation, how would you explain 5D?
I have a lot to say about this. Number one, what we want to look at is that the difference between 3D and 5D is like the difference between a child and adult. It's the same core being, but they have wisdom, they have experience, they have knowledge, and so it changes how they experience the world. I see 5D and 3D as vibrational data sets, and as such, they're like the Russian nesting dolls, that when you're in 3D, you can't see anything above 3D, but when you're in 5D, you can see and participate in 3D. And a lot of people who are examining this idea of 5D think that riding the wave to 5D means then you're there. And I have observed that that's simply not true. We are vacillating between 3D and 5D and hovering closer and closer, and little things trigger us to drop back into 3D. Our own energy levels, our own commitment to our spiritual growth affect our ability to stay in 5D. And so 5D is a place that everyone else calls heaven, if we could give it a common framework. And 3D is where we're at now. What I can tell you is that our job becoming 5D is inevitable. So you will grow up whether you want to or not. Mm-hmm. You can remain childlike, you can remain childish, but you're still going to grow up. And so the idea is move into that mastery gracefully, purposefully, rather than accidentally stumbling into it and struggling through it.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that Mother Earth is becoming a 5D planet again, and because of that, we are also ascending and expanding our consciousness? Is it?
Well, I think these are tandem events. I don't think one is a causer of the other. I also believe that Mother Earth is a little bit ahead of us and ready for shift and transition. And it's almost like she's waiting for us to catch up. One of the things that came through a number of years ago when I was teaching in Hong Kong, and it was a channeled message from Sanat Kumara. And the message was, the game is over, referring to 3D. The game is over. And just thinking of it as a game is huge. when one of my sons was in the military and he was in basic training, and they do all kinds of wacky stuff in basic training to prepare the young man for the possibility of war or difficult situations. So, they set them up in wacky situations. And he said to me, Mom, some of the guys in my unit are just freaking out over what they're doing. And he says, it's just a game. I was blown away that he could see that. But he'd played a lot of video games in his time, and he could clearly see the analogy and got it that all we have to do is get through this and we'll be fine. So the game is over. The game will end when there are no more players. Will you be the first to leave or the last? Mm-hmm. Pretty profound. And it basically says, okay, I'm either in or I'm not. And when I find myself falling out of the structure of 5D, I simply pick myself up and get back in that 5D environment. It doesn't mean that I have to stay in 3D. And we all have those moments. And I'll share with you a little something that I have been working on recently. I think I've got it, but I don't want to be too what's the word I want? I just want to put it out there that I'm willing and accepting that I have changed and that I am working on it. And that is this concept of I have to. And I have been saying for years that when we say I have to, we have surrendered our authority to someone or something else, not here in our sovereignty. So that phrase, I have to, has kind of crept in and become the main way we express our needs or our desires to accomplish something. So, I have to do the dishes. I have to pick up the baby. I have to get some groceries. Needs to be replaced, and it needs to find new ways we need to find new ways of expressing. We don't have to. We need to choose wisely. And so paying attention to our language is very, very important. And I have a new roommate who is one of my students. And in casual conversation, I had no idea that I was still using have to. And every time I would say it, he would repeat after me, have to? And I would be caught, if you will, common phrase in English, I was busted. So please know that we're all learning this. And in the book, Waking Up in 5D, I put in a table, words of power to replace your common language. I should is I choose. Mm-hmm. It's too difficult. I choose to make it fun and easy. It's not my fault. I think I'm responsible. How can I help fix it? And one of the other big words that I have discovered is common, not with me, fortunately, but with others. And that is teaching your children to say, I'm sorry. Because I'm sorry makes the offender below the offended. So what do you say instead? And the answer is, are you okay? When I say I'm sorry, then I'm giving authority to the person that I so-called offended to either accept or reject that apology. Whereas if I say, are you okay? They get to be validated. They get to explain what hurt when, I accidentally stepped on their toe, or, when I, stuck my elbow in their face, It's a way to undo the event without making it a power struggle. And think about it. Little kids know that it's a power struggle. How many times have I seen, maybe you've seen, a parent, in a public place saying to the child, say you're sorry. Mm-hmm. And the child will not do it. And they go back and forth and back and forth. But that's because it's a power play. Whereas if you teach your child, are you okay? When something happens, and then if you think you're responsible, you can say, I think I was responsible for this. Are you okay? Or are you okay? And they say, what happened? And you say, gosh, I didn't realize I was doing that. You don't have to say, I'm sorry. Now, obviously, in a lot of social circles, people still are expecting you to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In the workplace, people are expecting you to say, I'm sorry. But we can teach our close, significant others that I'm sorry isn't necessary. Now, that's a big relief to your beloved or your partner or your roommate or your family member if they're willing to play along. You don't ever have to say you're sorry again. Well, that's awesome. But that means I don't have to say I'm sorry either. Well, I don't know. So it gets to be funny, but playful. And that's the joy of 5D, because we recognize that we could still cause an incident. We could still cause a event to occur. But in 5D, there's no apology required.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the Course in Miracles, they say forgiveness is no longer required. And why is that? Because there are no affronts.
Yeah. And I love what you said about like the little moments that we can catch ourselves saying those things. And like you said, it's a practice. I try to catch myself whenever I'm going to write an email and say, I apologize, or say, I'm sorry, instead of, I'll say, thank you for something.
Telling me. Yeah.
Thank you for waiting.
And that's good. But I really like, are you okay? Because it validates that something did happen. And it lets the person who thinks they're a victim in the moment to identify what's going on for them and, to explain it. And once you get to explain it to another adult, usually you're done. Yeah. It's so surprising how we don't realize that when we give someone the platform to say what happened, and you can nod and smile and say, I get you.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have happened. I won't let it happen again. I made another table in the book about the differences between emotions in 3D and 5D. In emotions, we call an emotion called patience. In 5D, it's compassionate indifference. We don't mind one way or the other, but we have compassion. Concern is also compassion. We move from judgment to polite observation. And it's quite interesting how much we judge. So I don't like creamed potatoes, let's say. I could just as easily say, some people really like creamed potatoes, but it's not my thing. It sends a different vibe. It is not a disapproving vibe. It's actually an enthusiastic vibe. It doesn't mean you won't get angry, but you allow anger to become purposeful and steady and solid, not insulting, but, this is my boundary, So there's a whole list of ways that we express our emotion that when we're in 5D, we express in a different way, a more evolved way. And because this whole paradigm is so dramatically different, it is like moving from American football to soccer. In soccer, you don't need a lot of protective gear because there's no hits that way. So you don't need it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty powerful. That is like the difference between 3D and 5D. Stuff still happens. And that's something people have this expectation that nothing will happen. Well, if nothing would happen, you're already back at source because nothing's happening there. All the action is down here in the physical realm. And the cool thing is, this whole business of going 5D, as I said before, you're going to go 5D whether you're ready or not, whether you want to or not. And by becoming fifth dimensional ahead of time, you make it easier for those around you to also level up. And it's a lot more fun because then as you all level up together, nobody's struggling in the deep water. They can't swim.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier non-judgment. And for me, I think this is like one of the main characteristics of 5D or 5D living, finding
I
that
agree.
neutral place.
Mm-hmm.
However, when one looks outside, or they'll just walk out and walk around their block, or go to the airport, go to the mall, whatever, they might see a lot of, or even feel a lot of division and judgment. So for you, from your perspective and your feelings, because you're saying it's gonna happen whether you want it or not. Today, how do you see that division? And I know that's very like a linear way of thinking, but would you say that
So,
most humanity,
first of all, when we're out in public, we can ask for and claim a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I'm in contact with and everyone I'm in contract with. And what that does is sets the stage for everybody to level up around me for that day or for that moment when they are interacting with me. And that's very powerful. And the reason I use contract and contact, everyone I'm in contract with, is because I want my webmaster to have as good a day as I'm having. And everyone I'm in contact with means the strangers that I meet at the bank or the grocery store or whatever. And I am meeting them in a 5D way, energetically. And when I've created the bigger space that anybody I come near is leveling up, whether they're ready or not, they will find that interaction very powerful and very positive. So one of the things in the book is an evening prayer that says, I am waking up in 5D. That tells the universe, no matter what went down at night, I'm going to wake up in 5D, and I'm going to wake up with that awareness that I am loved and I am safe. Once we have those two things, nothing else matters.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to worry about anything. We might quote, what's the word I want? We might choose or desire to get things done, whether it's washing the dishes or writing a book. But the joy that permeates everything keeps us in a good place. You know, the very first time that I asked for a day of heaven on earth was when I was flying home from a West Coast city to the Midwest, where my home was at the time. And I had been on an overnight flight, and I refused to call them the name that most people say. I call them an overnight flight or a shut-eye flight. And I got off the plane, and because I was flying every week, and it was a small town, the lady who was the check-in clerk is also the baggage handler in the moment. And she recognized me and said, "Oh, hi, Maureen, how are you doing?" And without thinking, I used a phrase that I use in classrooms environment to explain a intense event. So I said, "Oh, well, I'm good, but I'm having a day from blank because I have to be back here in a couple hours to catch another plane to the East Coast." And she looked at me kind of funny, and I was so embarrassed that I had allowed that H word to slip out of my mouth in that way that I made a correction. And I said, "Oh, but I'm having a day of heaven on earth because I'm flying with United." And so then when I got home, I could hear water running. No faucets were on, but there was a leak in the basement that was flowing up over the edge of where the laundry equipment was. And the basement had like this much water on it. And I was, oh my God. So I called my neighbor who was, just knew stuff, and asked if he could come over, and we turned off the water at the main. I called the plumber, and the plumber said he'd be there in an hour. Who knows if that's true? And then my neighbor said, it's probably a leak in one of the pipes behind one of the walls. He said lots of the neighbors in this particular complex have had to replace their pipes. And I'm thinking, oh man, I don't want to do that. That's, a big bill. So when the plumber came, and he did come on time within the hour, he said, I want to drill in the upstairs bathroom. And I checked in with my higher self. Again, this is this fabulous tool. My higher self said, no, the lower bathroom. And then he said, well, where on the wall? Now he's being, annoyed that I'm telling him where to go. And I pointed to a place, and that hole that he made it possible for him to see where the problem was, drill another small hole next to it to get to it. And the whole repair of it was $100, which who has a plumber come in for such a small amount of money? So then my neighbor says, I'll come back and I'll bring some fans, and we'll dry out the wall in between the walls, and you pull your fans in, we'll get it all set up. And I was able to go to the bank and make my bank deposit. I was able to make my postal stop. This is way back when we were actually using postcards. And I called the airlines and said, can I please fly tomorrow? Because this is a big drama that I'm dealing with. And they said, no, we're totally overbooked tomorrow, but we could put you on the later flight if you'd prefer. And I said, okay. And I called my host, and she was not happy that I wanted to fly on a later flight, but what could she do? And I went to the bank and the post office, and on my way into the house, the phone's ringing, and there's United Airlines, a real person, not a recording, saying to me, both of our flights out of your city to the main city, Chicago, are running late, an hour late. And if you stay on the flight you're booked on, oh, and by the way, the airline waived my change fee because of my little drama and because I was a good customer. So she said, if you could come and catch the earlier flight, it's going to be leaving 1 hour later. Could you do that? And I almost laughed out loud because I had said almost the same thing in the car on the way home. Oh, I only really needed another hour because the suitcases are packed. I changed out the stuff I needed to change out. I've taken care of all the stuff. My neighbor's got a key, and he'll keep checking on the house. I'm good. So I said, yeah, I'm only 15 minutes away. I'm sitting on the plane, and I'm examining this big drama and how it was like, easy, 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 easy. Mm-hmm. And I asked, how did that happen? And I was told, you said you were having a day of heaven on earth. And I thought, oh my gosh, the next time I have a chock-a-block day, I'm going to ask for a day of heaven on earth. The second time I asked, I had the brilliance to decide, to choose, I can ask for a day of heaven on earth every day. And so can you.
That's the best takeaway that anyone can get from this interview, right? So tomorrow everybody wakes up, and that's what we tell ourselves. I loved the story because what you shared is what we perceive as 3D moments, or we can even call it 3D drama, but you're moving along those situations from a different place, right? From a different perspective, because you're not reactive and you're not in the drama. So I think that's
you're the observer, and you're compassionate towards yourself and everyone around you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
How can one, well, two questions, and I think you've already kind of answered it. Is it possible to stay in 5D and live in 5D only? And how does one, how can one recognize this or live in 5D only, if it's possible, from your perspective?
I think it's getting easier and easier to be in 5D all the time. We will have little triggers. I like to think that I'm in 5D most of the time, but I still get triggered once in a while. If you have somebody in your life who is no longer there, but used to be a problem, and so you've done your work and you've moved on. If somebody else sounds like that, it might trigger you. If you are sick or under the weather, you might react in a 3D way because you're hurting and you are struggling. If you're carrying entities of any kind, you might find yourself reacting because the entities will trigger you to be more reactive than you would normally be because they get to enjoy your emoting. So we clear ourselves every day. And when we go out and about, if we're interacting with a lot of people, we're doing clearing work, and that's really essential. And I do have 3 10-minute videos on YouTube that do teach you how to clear yourself. And we do have people who do high-level clearing. I like to say that the clearing you do for yourself every day is like the spot cleaning you do on your clothes or your carpet. But when a garment or your carpet gets really dirty, you call in the experts or you take it to the cleaners. So the ability to be 5D is there, and it is possible. But what's more important is to understand that if you slide back into 3D, you can slide right back. And that's called the magnanimous dimension. And the magnanimous dimension is this amazing environment. It's written about in the first chapter of Mastering Your 5D Self. And I would like to read to you what the Lords of Time said about the magnanimous dimension, because I want people to think of 3D, 4D, 5D as an hourglass. You're moving from 3D to 5D, but you got to go through this nexus called 4D. And 4D is a portal, or it is a train station. And nobody goes to the train station to spend the night unless you get stuck there. So these dimensions, you have to get through 4D, which is, some people refer to part of that as the astral plane, but it's this quality of energy that's more expansive, faster moving. So when you get really upset or really happy, you're probably in 4D. And then it's easy to either slide back down to 3D if you're angry, or to slide up to 5D. And for those of you who are musicians, I will refer you to the C major scale and say, think of 3D as the letter E, and 4D as the letter F, and 5D as the G. So if you were singing a scale, it would 1, 3, 5, 3, 1. Okay. If you were singing into the 4th dimension, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 4 has this quality; it wants to move. 4, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, 1. So if you hear this, and not everyone does, but if you can hear the pitches that I'm singing, you can actually begin to understand that these dimensions are fluid and that we're moving through them. So the Lords of Time opened up what they called the magnanimous dimension. And they say, we have urged you to bring in the energy of the combined integration of 3 dimensions. We know you are quite familiar with the energy of 3rd dimension, its polarity, its divisiveness, its goodness. And yes, there is goodness in the 3rd dimension. 4th dimension is integrating now within each of you. You are beginning to tap into the depths of joy, presence, and love. 4th dimension is the portal through which you magnify and transport yourself into 5th dimension. Because your world has been slow to catch up, we are now offering to you this combined quality of the nexus into the fifth dimension to reach each and every one of you. We name it the magnanimous dimension, an energy of great integration. It consists of knowing and understanding the perils of third, the passion of fourth, the ecstasy of fifth, and distilling it into an exquisite elixir of magnanimousness. You now have with you the outcome of the combined dimensions, and you may ask for a most magnanimous outcome. And this was channeled by the nine. So what a gift. You know, there was a time when moving into a higher place of expression wasn't so easy. And we all have what I will call the last hurrah, or that last area that we need a little extra boost. So I'm thinking one day that I'm doing pretty well landing in 5D. And then I got behind the wheel in my car. And I got on the freeway in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And, somebody cut me off, and I'm thinking, well, that guy's asleep at the wheel, and I have all these little side ideas that are not 5D. Okay. And so as these things are happening, and I'd already asked myself this question earlier that day, then I immediately got from my guides, okay, can you see that wasn't very 5D? And so then what I did is I chose a new pattern for myself. And that's one of the most important ways that we can get into 5D and stay there, is to catch ourselves in our 3D moments and then choose a new pattern. So my new pattern was, I'm blessing this driver, and they must be in a bigger hurry than me. So I'm calling in the angels and the dragons to help them get where they need to go with grace and ease. And it feels good to make that prayer for a stranger that, and you know how it is. There can be somebody who's driving and didn't even see you, and they pull in front of you. It's not like it's malicious.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for reading that passage. It's beautiful. And I loved your analogy of the musical notes as well. I'm a singer, so it makes total sense. And what came to my mind was the idea of harmony as well, because harmony is combination of those notes. It's not just about staying in C, it's wanting to move. And I think that's what we're doing, right? We're moving from 4D, 5D. And would you say, when you look at the collective today, most people at the moment are in 3D, 4D, or 5D?
I'm seeing 75% of the population on the planet are either expressing in 5D or ready to, and they need a little nudge. So we're much closer to this scale tipping in favor of 5D. There's these phrases called pay it forward, where you do something in advance to help someone else. And when someone says, well, I'd like to pay you back for the favor you did for me, you say, oh, don't worry about it. Just pay it forward. Do it for somebody else. And I heard a wonderful story about somebody who had been loaned enough money to, finish their college education. And then they began to sponsor other people because now they were well paid in their own work, and they attributed it being able to get the degree, blah, blah, blah. And so I see that the majority of people in the world that I'm interacting with are already in 5D. And the people that I'm not interacting with are often 5Ders without knowing it. And this is something that a lot of people don't realize. You don't have to believe in this to be 5D. And there are plenty of gracious, kind, loving people who don't need to have the upper hand or get even. Their love is expressing through them towards everyone in an unconditional way. but maybe they're not interested in the things that are aligned with that, but their behavior says they are 5D. And I think it's the behavior that matters. And of course, our thoughts help.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's those people that they're spiritual, but they don't wear the badge, or they.
That's right. That's right. That's
out.
right. And then the other 25%, some of those people are way showers to help other people change. So, if you grew up in a family where there was alcoholism and the parents were abusive, you have two ways you might be. You might be like them and be abusive to your children, or you might recognize that that's not cool and choose to be very loving and supportive of your children. So those difficult environments might actually trigger a person to choose to not be like their parents. And that's all they need, was that little nudge of experience. Mm-hmm. And it also allows those people who have had those experiences to help others who, one of the biggest things that comes up in the Akashic Records is someone saying, well, why would I choose such an abusive father? And in one very poignant example, the woman had already been told she was an angel. And so she said, what did I do to deserve this treatment? And the record keeper said, we don't see that you deserve it. We see you chose it to stop the madness. And she went, oh my God, that's so true, because I had younger siblings, and whenever my father went after them, I offered myself instead. Mm-hmm. So many of you who are listening, who are part of this broadcast, may recognize you haven't done anything to bring this on, but you are choosing to stop the madness and to be part of the solution. And there are many angels that volunteer in that category. And angels don't have any concept of how hard it would be on the earth. Mm-hmm. And so when they get here and they encounter it, they're looking around going, what the heck is wrong with this world I live in? I don't get it. And there's a real reason why they don't get it, because in their world, they don't have any concept of evil for evil's sake. So they struggle to adapt. And when you find yourself struggling to adapt, I ask for a miracle, and I recommend you do too. So as a listener, you may have encountered difficult situations yourself. And we are going through what's called the dark night of the soul. As we shift and transform our reality, we don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know when our reality is going to make a big shift so that everybody is on the high side of 5D. And so we're a little bit like that caterpillar in the chrysalis. There's no timing. There's no watch saying, okay, in 5 days, you're going to hatch and you'll be a butterfly. They're just waiting in the dark. Complete transformation occurs. So the hardest thing in the world is to wait. If you would tell me, can you hang on for 5 minutes? I'll hang on for 5 minutes. I might even hang on for 10. But if you don't show up after 20 minutes, I'm gone. And it's not because I'm mad at you. It's because I got things to do. So we in 3D are so driven by the society that we thought we wanted to be part of, that as people wake up, they're deciding, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do that. And that's what's changing the whole reality. And one by one, we're being good to each other. And I think that's the most wonderful thing. I'll give you one other example that is absolutely outrageous, but this is a true story and it happened to me. So I am in a car on Manhattan's West Side Highway. And it's like a 3-lane highway and one side, and so 6 lanes altogether. And there's nobody behind me. So I made a 3-lane change into the left turn lane and turn left. And there's a policeman kind of directing traffic. And so I stopped the car, rolled down the window. And I said, can you tell me where to park? I'm looking for the FedEx. And he looks at me and he says, pull over. And right away from his tone, I know I'm in trouble. So he comes up to me and he says, what you just did is illegal. And I thought about it for a second. I said, yeah, but I'm new in town. I don't know my way around. I'm trying to sell my car. I shouldn't even be driving my car because I'm trying to sell it. He actually says to me, well, what do you want for it? We go through this whole routine. And he says, oh, yeah, you should be able to get that for this car because it's a nice car. And then we get all finished with this sweet conversation. He says, I'm going to have to give you a ticket. And I kind of take a breath. And then he says, but you can fight it. New Yorkers fight tickets, right? So I just looked at him and I said, I could never do that. And he said, why? And I said, I deserved it. And he looked at me and says, I can't write you a ticket now. That's 5D. Totally 5D.
Yeah. I'd love for you to give us some practical things that we can do on a daily basis for anyone that's listening or watching and they're thinking, I'd love to have that more of that 5D experience in my day-to-day basis. So you've given one that's wonderful. Wake up, tell yourself that you're going to have a day in heaven.
A day of heaven on earth.
A day of heaven. And you give us.
And the other one, of course, the other major one is I'm asking for this day of heaven on earth for everyone I come in contact with and everyone I'm in contract with. Mm-hmm. So that kind of expands that energy. Another way to stay in 5D is to ask for help from your angels and your guides to help you stay in 5D. Another way is to start to notice your language and, focus on one phrase or one word at a time that you tend to use that is not 5D. It's not fair, for example. So instead, you might say, I wonder where that happened. It changes the vibe on that. And so learning the language of fifth dimension allows a person to reframe the reality that's in front of them. The minute they reframe the reality in front of them, they have co-created a new version of the timeline they are on. And that's huge. People don't realize what they're doing when they choose to reframe their language. So, whether English is your mother tongue or not, however you express I should, instead I choose. Challenges or difficulty become opportunities. It's an opportunity for me to learn how to fix this. Mm-hmm. Commonly people say life's a struggle or it's the pits or any of those kinds of phrases. You want to change it up. Life's an adventure. Life's fun and easy. You can even hear yourself say life's, this is a pit, and then say, but I choose to make it fun and easy. Now, the reason that phraseology is so powerful is because in English, the but word is a takeaway. She's so pretty, but it's too bad she's overweight. Okay. I'm being silly here. The but word is the takeaway. So if you catch yourself saying it, then just follow it with but and a new phrase that antidotes what you just said. It's quite amazing what your language changing will do. I have lots of guided meditations that I recommend people use. So the guided meditations, I usually have a free one on my blog post every month. And there's probably 20 or more guided meditations that are very specific to help people move through their, I'll use the word lack of ability to get into 5D. Mm-hmm. One of them that's very powerful is called the Golden Bowl. And the Golden Bowl is a guided meditation that activates the sinuses around the body on the forehead and opens that channel up so that your connection to God, source, whatever you call it, is clear. And my irreverent name for all of this is that it's the satellite dish to call home. So, and there's lots of stories. I mean, you don't have to take my word for it. On our website, there's a whole page full of endorsements of people's experiences using just that one meditation. Another tool is to learn the Merkaba meditation, because that does put you in 5D. And just like in the Akashic Records, when you open the Akashic Records, you are given access to the 11th dimension. That helps you understand the world, the fifth dimensional world. So you get opportunities and examples. For instance, there was a radio show where a man called in and complained about his adult daughter, who was still very obnoxious towards him. And he was a good dad, meditated regularly, taught his kids what he knew. And he couldn't understand why she was so obnoxious to him. And the record keeper said through me that this father and daughter were friends or comrades at one time and became arch enemies. And he went on to become a spiritual being, but she did not. And he agreed to sponsor her in this lifetime in order that she might level up faster. And so the record keeper said, you didn't do anything to make this happen. You volunteered for this. And then they said, this is the thing that always tickles me about the Akashic Records, they always give you advice as well as answers. Then they said, may take a few years, but keep doing what you're doing, be a loving father and do everything you would do as if she were your best friend, send the presents, send the texts, whatever you need to do. And she will come around, but it may take a couple of years. And as a parent, remember I was talking about waiting, being told, when is this going to happen? It's a lot easier to know this is going to come together in the next 2 to 5 years, rather than saying, who knows how long she'll be that way? Who knows how long she'll, behave in a mean way to you before she wakes up and decides you're okay. And so when we know that we are experiencing difficulty, the fastest way that we can get the outcome we want is twofold: to unhook from how it's going to happen or when, and instead pretend it's already done. And that's very, very powerful. And I wrote a whole book about that, and based on sacred geometry, called Be a Genie. So I think some of our books are on sale on our website. You pay postage, but you don't think they're free or something. Some of these books are free. So these are powerful tools that help people. I highly recommend, learning to open the Akashic Records through the lineage that we have, because we're very careful about who we work with. And I highly recommend that you consider learning the Merkaba meditation and or getting some of the other meditations. I've done the homework, the hard part for you. Mm-hmm. So it's like buying a cake mix. I've done the hard part for you, put everything together. All you have to do is show up and do your part.
Yeah. And as usual, I'll put the links in the description. And if you want to send me specific links as well, I can just put them in the description so that people can find them easily. I have one quick question about the language that you were talking about. Because in the beginning of the interview, you talked about the have to. So what is the replacement?
The replacement for have to is I get to. I look forward to. It's my pleasure. This is another thing that when my sons were little, I didn't consciously teach them, but I began saying to them when they would ask me to do something, oh, it would be my pleasure to do that for you, honey. Mm-hmm. And I no longer have to. It's my pleasure to do this for you. So there's lots of ways to say it without giving away your power.
Yeah. If you say, I get to choose, I get to wash the dishes, that changes the whole perspective and the whole experience.
Or I want to wash the dishes because I love a clean kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm looking forward to having company and I want this place picked up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I have one last question. You are full of wisdom, so there are many questions that I want to ask, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. Just one last question that I'm actually curious, because I read in your book, Mastering Your 5D Self, that you no longer need to heal emotional wounds to be fifth dimensional. Mm-hmm. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this, because I found it very interesting and
sounding. Yeah. Well, what's happening is the emotional wounds are part of a 3D system of keeping score. I was the victim. This person did this to me. And once you decide it's a game, even if you play video games, you play a game like Monopoly, you walk away from the game. Well, that was fun. You don't remember that somebody stole your house or, made you broke. You don't remember any of that. You just said that was fun, and you enjoy each other's company. So that's the first thing, to start to look at our life as a game. And if we look at it as a game, and that we don't have to win, we just have to play and be present. Because our job isn't to win. Our job is to expand experiences of being in a body. And that puts us more in 5D. Yeah. There was a time when we allowed a certain amount of negativity to populate our world. And it made the light more bright because we had that point of contrast. But now we have that in our memory banks. We don't need it anymore. Mm-hmm. And at the end of one of the books I wrote called Beyond the Flower of Life, I was in the Paris train station and I came upon this beautiful mural of Archangel Michael with his sword, and he was like upside down, with his sword flying and, this mosaic flying everywhere. And Archangel Michael spoke to me and said, you no longer need the balance of good and evil. All you need is a homeopathic dose of the dark to hold the balance for all the light. And that was really before the big 3D, 5D movement. That was, back like in 95 or 2000. It was quite some time ago. So I see that as the segue into no more karma, the segue into stepping into 5D. We don't need to keep score. There are people, and this is what I'd like to leave you with. There are people in your life that love you so much and you trust so much that if you handed them $100 and said, can you hold this for me until I get back? I want to make sure I have money when I come back from vacation. You would still be there when you came back. You wouldn't even think twice about it. You'd let them hold it. That's the confidence level we want to have about ourselves and the people around us and the life we are living. And every time we experience someone who doesn't live up to that standard, it's our duty to ourselves to look at that experience and to choose to consciously love them anyway.
Mm.
And what that does is helps us level up right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful note to end. Love anyway. Yeah. Maureen, thank you so much for all the work that you do, for sharing the wisdom and the information that comes through you to help humanity raise the level of consciousness. And thank you so much for shining your light.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And I'd love to join you again sometime. It's a real pleasure. Absolutely.
Thank you. Much love. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this conversation. If you would like to learn more about Maureen's work, you can visit her website, www.stgermainmysteryschool.com. You can find the links in the description for her Instagram and her Facebook as well. And once again, if this has brought you value, please subscribe to my podcast or my channel and share it with that one friend who you know is gonna love this episode. As always, keep shining your light, keep your heart open, and let love lead the way. I love you. See you in the next episode. Bye.